The most convincing proof of your energy field's existence is not located in a quantum physics laboratory. It has been hiding in plain sight for 2,000 years, etched in stone and painted in gold within the world's most sacred places. In the next 30 minutes, we will use this sacred art to unlock the blueprint for your own radiant potential. This is an instruction manual, not for the art itself, but for the energy you feel every day, yet we're never taught how to consciously direct. But first, consider this. Have you ever felt a distinct presence or a tangible weight in the air around a certain person? What if that experience is not just a feeling, but a perception of something profoundly real? There is a quiet ache that lives within the modern soul. It is the feeling of being ordinary. We navigate our days filled with small duties and fleeting joys. And when we look at ourselves, we see a person bound by familiar limits and predictable patterns. We feel profoundly, inescapably human. And in this humanness, we often feel disconnected from the vast, luminous potential that the great spiritual traditions speak of. Perhaps you have felt this yourself. You walk into the quiet, echoing hall of a museum, or the hushed sanctuary of an ancient temple. Your eyes fall upon a work of art, a painting of a saint, bathed in an impossible golden light, or a statue of a Buddha, serene and unshakable. You feel a sense of awe, a deep and resonant admiration for the story it tells. But then, a subtle sense of distance creeps in. A quiet internal whisper says, "How beautiful. But that is not my world. That is mythology. That is a story about someone else from another time." We are taught to see this art as symbolic. We are told the golden halo is a metaphor for goodness, that the radiant light is a simple artistic convention for holiness. And so we stand before these masterpieces and we feel a profound separation. The figures depicted seem to belong to a different species, one for whom the laws of nature were suspended. Their reality seems disconnected from our own, their state of being a distant, unattainable ideal. This very feeling of separation is one of the great illusions. For here lies the central question that can change our entire understanding of human potential. A question we will investigate together. What if this sacred art is not merely a collection of symbols? What if it is not just a tribute to holiness? What if it is evidence? What if these artists, separated by centuries, continents, and cultures, were not just inventing a visual language, but were all attempting to document the very same observable phenomenon, a real, tangible, energetic reality, a luminous field that emanates from a human being who has achieved a state of profound inner coherence? They were painting what could be felt, and sometimes what could even be seen. They were leaving behind a record, not of myth, but of mastery, a visual testimony to the existence of a body of light that is not a gift to a chosen few, but an innate potential within us all. This changes everything. It reframes these sacred images not as portraits of unattainable saints, but as mirrors, reflecting back to us a destiny we have forgotten. They become a map, a guide. To test this theory, to see if this map is true, we must begin by looking at the most powerful examples humanity has ever produced. We must ask, what does this sacred art truly tell us about the energy of the two great pillars of world spirituality? If sacred art is indeed a mirror, we must turn our gaze to its most powerful and persistent reflections. Let us look to the twin peaks of human spiritual aspiration, the two figures whose lives have shaped the consciousness of billions, Jesus and the Buddha. Here, the evidence for a radiant energy field becomes undeniable, not as a footnote, but as a central feature of their very being. Consider the image of Jesus in Western art. For over 1,500 years, he has been depicted with a halo, a luminous golden disk of light surrounding his head. We have seen this image so many times that we have become blind to its radical implication. We dismiss it as a mere symbol, a placeholder for divinity. But this is a profound misunderstanding. The halo is not just a sign of moral purity. It is an echo of a direct energetic event described in the scriptures themselves. Recall the story of the Transfiguration. The texts say that Jesus took his disciples to a high mountain, and there he was transformed before them. His face, they reported, shone like the sun, and his garments became as white as the light. This is not the language of metaphor. This is the language of perception. It is a description of a human being whose internal state of consciousness had become so radiant, so intensely coherent, that it began to emit a visible physical light, altering his very appearance. The artists who came later, who painted the golden halo for the next 2 millennia, were not simply adding a decorative circle. They were attempting to capture and make permanent this very state of transfiguration. The halo is a constant reminder that the Master from Galilee was understood to be a being of profound, radiant energy. Now let us travel from the sun-baked hills of Galilee to the shade of the Bodhi tree in India and look upon the image of the Buddha. Here again, we find the same phenomenon. In countless statues and paintings, the Buddha is depicted surrounded by a radiant aura, a circle of light known as a Prabhamandala. Just like the halo, it is easy to dismiss this as mere artistic flair. But within the deep philosophical framework of Buddhism, this light has a very precise meaning. It is said to be the visible manifestation of the Buddha's Sambhogakaya, which can be translated as the body of bliss, or the body of radiant enjoyment. It is not his physical body of flesh and blood, but a subtle body of pure energy and light that an enlightened being consciously manifests. This radiant aura is not a symbol of his enlightenment. It is the direct expression of his enlightenment. It is the visual evidence that he is no longer operating merely from a physical form, but from a vast, luminous field of awakened consciousness. And here we must pause, because this is not a coincidence. This is a convergence of the highest order. 2 profoundly different cultures, 2 distinct philosophical systems, 2 unique artistic traditions, separated by thousands of miles and with little to no direct contact in their formative years. Both arrived at the exact same visual conclusion. The highest state of human consciousness radiates light. This is a profound revelation. It suggests that light is not simply a convenient metaphor for goodness or purity. It appears to be the very language of enlightened consciousness itself. It is a fundamental property of a being who has realized their true nature. It is not what these masters did, but what they became. The artistic convergence is stunning, but it points to a deeper question. If this energy was a known reality to the mystics within these traditions, what did they call it? What were their technical terms for this sacred radiance, and what did they understand about its nature? The striking convergence in the art of Jesus and Buddha points us toward a profound truth. We are not dealing with myth, but with a technology of consciousness. This radiant light was not seen as a random miracle, but as the predictable result of a specific inner work. The mystics within these traditions were, in their own way, scientists of the soul. They observed this phenomenon, they named it, and they documented the methods to cultivate it. In the ancient spiritual laboratories of India, the yogis and rishis had a precise word for this spiritual radiance: Tejas. The word itself is rich with meaning. It does not simply mean light. It implies a lustrous, fiery, and potent brilliance. It is the glow of purified vital energy. Tejas is understood to be the subtle essence of fire, the radiance that emanates from a being whose inner flame of awareness burns brightly and cleanly. This was not a passive state. It was the direct result of tapas, a core concept in yogic practice. While we often translate tapas as discipline or austerity, its root meaning is far more elemental: to heat. The spiritual path was seen as an alchemical process. Through intense focus, meditation, and self-discipline, the practitioner generates a powerful inner heat. This psychic fire does not merely burn away impurities, attachments, and conditioning. It quite literally cooks the raw, latent energies of the human system, refining them into a substance of a much higher and more subtle vibration. Tejas is the visible evidence of this successful inner alchemy. It is the glow that proves the lead of ordinary consciousness is being transformed into the gold of enlightened awareness. Now let us travel back to the contemplative silence of the Christian world, particularly to the mystics of the Eastern Orthodox tradition. Here, within the deep stillness of the monasteries, they also spoke of and sought to experience this divine light. They called it the uncreated light, or sometimes the Taboric light, named for the Mount of Transfiguration. The distinction they made is critical. This was not, in their understanding, a created physical light like that of the sun or a candle. It was something far more profound. According to the great mystic Saint Gregory Palamas, the uncreated light is the very energy, the grace, the radiance of God Himself. It is an energy that permeates all of creation, but remains unseen by our ordinary senses. However, through profound stillness and the ceaseless practice of inner prayer, a human being can purify the eye of the heart and begin to perceive this divine luminosity directly. For the hesychasts, the mystics of this tradition, the goal of life was theosis union with God. To perceive the uncreated light was to have a direct experience of the divine energies in which one sought to participate. The halo, then, seen from this perspective, is the artist's humble and inadequate attempt to paint an unpaintable reality, the visible manifestation of God's own energy shining through a completely transparent and purified human soul. On the surface, Tejas, a fiery essence cultivated from within, and the uncreated light, a divine grace perceived from without, may seem worlds apart. But this is merely a difference in perspective, not in substance. While one path emphasizes building the fire from within, and the other focuses on becoming a clear window for the light from without, both ultimately describe the same outcome: a human system so purified that it can channel and radiate a divine energy. They are both describing a sacred operation that takes place in the same hidden arena, the subtle body. Both traditions understood that beyond our physical anatomy of flesh and bone lies a second body of light and energy, a network of channels and centers that acts as the interface between the physical world and the world of pure consciousness. Both the yogi generating Tejas and the Christian mystic preparing to perceive the Taboric light were engaged in the same fundamental work, purifying this subtle anatomy so that a higher, more luminous energy could flow through it and become manifest. This reveals a hidden science, a consistent methodology behind the light of the saints. But it leads us to the heart of the mechanism. Every process requires a fuel. Every fire needs something to burn. If the subtle body is the engine that produces this light, what is the raw primal energy that fuels it? We have followed the trail of light from the art of the West to the wisdom of the East. We have seen that this radiant field was not just a symbol, but a known phenomenon, a state of being meticulously described by the mystics. This leads us from the gallery of history into the engine room of the soul itself. If the body of light is the result, what is the process? If Tejas and the uncreated light are the emissions, what is the fuel, and what is the engine that burns it? To understand this, we must put aside our modern mechanical metaphors of engines and fuels and embrace one that is far more ancient, elegant, and alive. Think of your nervous system, your mind, and your subtle body not as a machine, but as a perfectly crafted musical instrument. Imagine it as a Stradivarius violin, resting in its case, holding within it an infinite potential for beauty, but for now, silent. The first component of this sacred alchemy is prana. Prana is the very air in the concert hall. It is the life force of the universe, the subtle, intelligent energy that animates all things. It is in the breath you are taking right now. It is in the sunlight warming the earth. It is the silent, ambient potential that fills all of space waiting. Like the air, it is neutral, omnipresent, and available to all. When you feel energized, vibrant, and alive, you are filled with an abundance of prana. When you feel depleted and exhausted, your reserves are low. Prana is the raw, universal energy that we draw into our instrument day after day. But air alone makes no music. For music to be created, there must be a musician. This brings us to the second and most dynamic component, Shakti. Shakti is the divine, intelligent, and creative power of the universe. She is the cosmic artist. In the yogic traditions, this immense potential is said to lie dormant within the human system, coiled and waiting. She is the musician who sees the silent violin. Shakti is the conscious, focused intention that picks up the bow. She is the wisdom that knows precisely which strings to touch and with what pressure. She is the divine will that draws the bow of awakened consciousness across the strings of the human nervous system. And what is the result? It is not just motion. It is not just heat. It is resonance. It is harmony. It is a coherent vibration that fills the instrument and then radiates outward, filling the entire concert hall with its presence. This music, this sublime and orderly vibration that emanates from a perfectly played instrument, is the body of light. The halo, the Tejas, the aura. These are not things. They are the song of a soul in perfect resonance. They are the audible, palpable proof that the raw energy of prana is being masterfully organized and expressed by the awakened intelligence of Shakti. And herein lies the great art of living, does it not? To shift from being an instrument played by the chaotic winds of circumstance to becoming a conscious musician of our own being. To learn to draw in the universal prana through our awareness and allow the inner Shakti to create a song of coherence, peace, and light. This ancient physics of the soul, this alchemy of energy and consciousness, is a beautiful and complete system described in countless sacred texts. But the modern mind, steeped in skepticism, rightfully asks for evidence. It is one thing to speak of violins and musicians in a metaphorical sense. It is another to see its real-world impact. Do we have any verifiable modern proof of what happens when a true master of this inner music walks upon the world stage? This physics of the soul, this sublime alchemy of prana and Shakti, is a complete and beautiful theory. But the modern mind, rightfully, seeks a bridge from the ancient text to the observable world. We need proof. We need a case study where this radiant field of energy stepped out of the pages of Scripture and onto the stage of modern history, under the full skeptical gaze of the Western world. That moment arrived in 1893 in the bustling industrial city of Chicago at the First Parliament of World's Religions. The event was a grand showcase of Victorian intellect and progress. The speakers were learned theologians, respected scholars, and prominent religious leaders, their words carefully chosen, their arguments meticulously crafted. And then a young, unknown Hindu monk from India was called to the podium. His name was Swami Vivekananda. He was a striking figure, but he was an outsider. He was nervous. He had never addressed such a large and imposing assembly. He began his speech not with a theological treatise, but with 5 simple words: Sisters and Brothers of America. And then something extraordinary happened. The historical record is unequivocal. Before he could utter another word, the entire assembly of 7,000 people rose to their feet in a thunderous 2-minute standing ovation. They were not applauding his words, for he had barely spoken. They were not applauding his reputation, for he had none in that part of the world. They were responding to something else entirely. They were responding to the sheer, palpable force of his presence. The newspapers of the time, written by secular, hard-nosed journalists, struggled to find the language to describe what they had witnessed. The Boston Evening Transcript reported on September 30th, 1893. He is a great favorite at the Parliament. If he merely crosses the platform, he is applauded. The New York Herald stated bluntly, he is undoubtedly the greatest figure in the Parliament of Religions. After hearing him, we feel how foolish it is to send missionaries to this learned nation. The press wrote not of a philosopher, but of a phenomenon, describing his divine right to be a leader, his overwhelming charisma, and a presence that commanded absolute silence and attention. And here is the revelation, the central climax of our investigation. What were these reporters, these men of science and industry, actually describing? They were using the only vocabulary available to them in a post-Enlightenment world. They called it magnetism. They called it charm. They called it a powerful personality. But what they were truly witnessing, what they were attempting to document, was the modern, observable effect of a fully cultivated body of light. They were describing what it feels like to stand in the presence of a human being whose inner instrument is being played to perfection. They were feeling the coherent, powerful resonance of a soul whose prana had been fully mastered and organized by an awakened Shakti. This is the key. The ancient artist, seeking to portray the enlightened state of a Buddha or a Christ, dipped his brush in gold and painted a halo of light. The modern journalist, seeking to portray the same state in Vivekananda, dipped his pen in ink and wrote the word presence. They are both describing the exact same phenomenon. The art of the ancients was never meant to be a literal photograph. It was an experiential translation. It was an attempt to show you what it feels like to be in the presence of that energy. The proof of your energy field is not therefore just in 2,000-year-old art. It is in the historical record of a man who, just over a century ago, silenced a room and captivated a nation, not just with his words, but with the undeniable power of his radiance. This is not a myth. It is a documented human capacity. It is our potential. And it raises the final, most important question. How can we begin to cultivate this presence within ourselves? We have journeyed through history, art, and the accounts of saints and sages. We have seen the evidence and understood the theory. Now the journey must turn from the outer world to the inner. For this knowledge is not meant for mere collection. It is meant for transformation. The purpose of a map is not to be admired, but to be used to find the treasure. I invite you now to participate in a simple yet profound practice. It is not designed to build a halo, but rather to help you feel and consciously cultivate the very energy from which halos are born. This is the practice of the crown of light. Find a place where you can sit comfortably, with your spine relatively straight, and gently close your eyes. Take a deep, slow breath in, and as you exhale, release the weight of your day. First, let us find the source. Bring your awareness to the very center of your chest, to the space of your heart. Let your attention rest there. Now call to mind a feeling of genuine, heartfelt gratitude. It does not need to be for something monumental. Perhaps it is the warmth of the sun on your skin, the kindness of a stranger, or the simple, steady rhythm of your own breath. Find that feeling and allow it to truly blossom in your heart space. Notice the physical sensation that accompanies it. A warmth, an expansion, a gentle hum. This sensation is real. This is your energy. This is your power plant. Now we will guide this energy. Imagine this warm, brilliant feeling in your chest beginning to ascend. See it as a column of gentle, liquid light, rising effortlessly through the central channel of your body. It moves up through your throat, past your mind, rising with a steady, peaceful grace toward the very top of your head. There is no force here, only allowing. As this column of light reaches the crown of your head, feel it gently pool there for a moment, and then allow it to overflow. Like a silent, beautiful fountain, this energy spills forth, cascading softly down in all directions. It flows down the front of your face, down the sides of your head, and down your back, forming a perfect sphere, a brilliant crown of living light all around your head. This is your halo, not as a symbol in a painting, but as an energetic reality that you are activating right now. And finally, we radiate. For this last moment, simply sit. Sit within this field of coherence you have just created. Feel the qualities it imparts. A sense of quiet dignity, a profound clarity, a deep and abiding peace. You are not trying to get light from somewhere else. You are not begging for it or seeking it. You are simply sitting in the stillness and remembering that you are, and always have been, the source from which it shines. We began our journey today by looking at ancient art as evidence, and we have discovered that the most profound proof lies not on a canvas, but within your own chest. Sacred art, we now see, is not a record of unattainable beings from a distant past. It is a mirror, left behind by our ancestors to reflect the luminous potential that lies dormant within every one of us. The halo, the Tejas, the radiant aura. These are not different things, but different names for the same timeless truth. A cultivated consciousness radiates. An ancient master once said, "It is not I who speak, but the Father who dwells in me who does the works." Perhaps this points to the ultimate secret. Perhaps the greatest work we will ever do is not in what we build, say, or achieve in the outer world, but in the quality of the energy we allow to move through us. The greatest art is in becoming a clear vessel for this light. The question then, as you go forward from this moment, is not whether you have an energy field. You do. The only question that remains is this: what kind of music is your presence playing in the world? In the comments below, share one word that describes the music, the quality of energy, that you will choose to radiate today. Let us create a symphony together.